we can, so we can stand around and have a drink and continue this conversation. Thank you. Just wait a couple of minutes till the last few people take their seats. There's still a fair few out there. And the best now you put that in my head.
No, it happened to me once at university to give a lecture student and say, Dr. Schenk, I said, no, call me Gary.
What's your name? And give me your paper. And you might go as close as you can.
Just maybe flag.
Yeah.
So it's a little close.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. If you could come in and take your seats and we'll get underway. You're right. Okay. Thank you and welcome back. And now to our Research Innovations panel, and this is led by Professor Gary Schenk from the School of Chemistry and Molecular Biosciences at the University of Queensland. And Professor Schenk's research focuses on biocatalysts, their structure and function, and their application in biotechnology. Of particular interest is the use of biocatalysts for cell-free production cascades that facilitate the conversion of renewable feedstocks into valuable products. Professor Schenk, I'm glad I'm not asking the questions here. Please provide a warm welcome to Professor Schenk.
Thanks, Madonna. Well, actually, I won't give any talk, so you don't have to worry about what Madonna just said, because I'm just here to moderate, and I'm really happy to do so, because this has been so far a fantastic meeting, and I'm sure you all feel the same. For me, it's been a fantastic learning experience. I mean, I've met many interesting people, listened to many great talks, and I've taken an awful lot of sort of enthusiasm from this meeting, and I'm very hopeful that we can actually translate sort of what we sort of set out to do over the next sort of near future. And having Brisbane Olympics coming up, we have a real mandate to really build something strong. So now, research innovation, the session here. So this is sort of the science session for this talk. I mean, science research, of course, underpins much of the bioeconomy. Now, what we will do is each of our fantastic panelists, in their own right, each is a sort of an outstanding scientist. So we give them about 5 minutes sharp to sort of talk about their main research interests, but also sort of what they can contribute to the bioeconomy in Queensland and beyond. And I'm aware, being a scientist myself, scientists and time is sort of, it's like traveling closer and closer to a black hole. I mean, as you get closer and closer, as you may know, time starts to stretch, it sort of becomes relative and eventually irrelevant. So I will make sure that this is not going to happen. So 5 minutes each. So what we do is we give each of them this 5-minute pitch, and then we have sort of 10, 15 minutes to sort of have a little bit of a discussion about the research, but also what it would take to actually translate this fantastic potential we have to make Queensland really sort of the global sort of showcase of the bioeconomy. So without further ado, I won't introduce each of the speakers, because each of them already, of course, was introduced, has already sort of participated in panels, like in Bernadette's case. I mean, she should probably ask LSQ and the government to pay her, because she's been pretty much in every session. But so I'll just keep it very short. And Andrew, if you don't mind, from JCU, I'll start with you.
Well, whoops. I think someone else is starting. Excellent. No, it's all about
So, all right. Okay, good. Then we go backwards. So that means number 5 is now number 1. Ben? Ben, from you.
Okay, so I'm Ben Hankamer. I direct the Centre for Solar Biotechnology, and we have 30 international teams working on a multi-scale approach to developing these technologies, from the molecular genetic engineering approach up to demonstration scale systems design. We've worked with about 50 industry partners to date. We have a series of programs. I'm just going to let these run across the screen, and many of these programs are product focused. And that is deliberate so that we can encourage industry engagement and work on the development of the business models. But also there are process-focused components like the Integrated Bioeconomy Project, which is looking at next generation solar-driven technologies, and also how we integrate that into green smart cities of the future. There's a Growing Roads program, for example, looking at how we might integrate microalgae production systems into cities and city infrastructure, which will be increasingly important as our global urbanization increases. So apart from building connections, we also have the opportunity to build biorefineries. We can make multiple products out of the one stream, and that actually can significantly improve the economics. So you'll be familiar, obviously, with traditional greenhouse systems, but also there is obviously a massive drive in terms of looking at vertical farming systems, and what I've called solar factory there on the right-hand side, where we're using microalgae systems in greenhouses. And these are particularly useful for really high-value products like vaccine production as algae, for example. And one of the questions is, which of these systems is the best for your particular application, and how do you work that out? And particularly moving in the bioeconomy, we want to have both an economic output, but also a social and an environmental output too. So I'm going to show you how we do that. So we've developed a model called TELCA, Techno-Economic and Life Cycle Analysis. With that, we can import climate data for a particular location. We can import the system, the costs, the energy component, and the CO2 emissions that go in and out of that system. And that generates a thermal model inside this greenhouse, inside this model. You have a crop of your choice, in this case, take your pick, and a quality correction factor and yield correction factor. So if it gets too hot, everything dies. If it's low, it's not going to work that well. And ultimately, if you have a product price and yield, you can work out the economic return, which we've modeled here as the internal rate of return, and that is the economic axis on that cube. The social axis is the energy in and out of the system, because you need energy to drive society, but you could swap out other things like regional jobs. The third one is looking at the environmental component. In this case, I've done greenhouse gas emissions. And the strategy really is to start from your base case and use these simulations, which are about 130 simultaneous equations, to drive the process and optimize it. And that delivers you the economic, social, and environmental benefits that you're trying to develop. Based on this and working with the architecture school, we're then also looking at the development of solar factories. This was a figure developed by Fred Tejero in the architecture school, looking at using solar photovoltaics in order to drive LEDs for the production of crops inside the greenhouse. And this is also a simulation of a microalgae production facility that we're working on with FKG and other partners on part of an ARC linkage grant. This is a 1 hectare facility of microalgae production systems, and there's a whole range of different designs. But because you have the architectural models and because you have the techno-economic models that accompany it, allows you to quickly evaluate the system. So we can actually simulate a 1-year run in about 10 minutes of this process. I wanted to just put this in because we talked about the Olympics and coming to Brisbane, and there is also the opportunity here for looking at art and the installation of art and making this the Green Games. We'll finish with that.
Thanks a lot. So we leave it with questions to the end. So we basically will have these 5 pitches, and then we sort of will have hopefully quite a lot of time for discussion. So let's move on to the next. Actually, I don't know now who's next either. So this time it is Andrew. Or
I think I'd prefer his presentation. It looked really, really good. We should go back. So I was thinking a bit about scaling up and the problems that we have in scaling up. And I'm following on from the previous presentation a little bit. So really this is presenting work that comes from my colleagues. Ooh, that's sensitive. Dean Jerry and Chris Mitchell from Sea Farms. So the top figure is what chickens looked like in the late 1950s. And the bottom figure is what chickens looked like 20 years ago. And so in that time, in 40 years, essentially, and they all come from the same date that they were slaughtered. So what happened in chickens during that time is that the growth rates rose by 400%. All right, almost all of that change was due to the genetics. There's some change in there about husbandry and all sorts of other things, but almost all about the genetics. Now, I made the point before that we have a lot of potential. So, which one? Okay, so, and I talked before about tiger prawns, and there's huge potential in aquaculture species because they haven't been selected previously. Enormous potential to do exactly the same thing for them as what was done for chickens. And in fact, get much, much higher returns for that sort of selective breeding than you could for any terrestrial livestock at all. We've become incredibly good in order to do this properly, you need a lot of genetic information. You need to understand the heritability of characteristics, and you need to have a lot of genetic information and markers to connect that to. And in fact, we've become incredibly good at that. But where we now have a problem is acquiring the phenotype information effectively to quantify our prawns in this particular case, and to quantify things like size and growth rate, but also taste and and colour and things like that that are important in what the quality is of the prawn in the final market. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some advances that were made with our partners about how we acquired that phenotype. And so really this has taken an approach, this was, I think it said in the previous presentation, I measured over 500,000 prawns. And the only way that you could achieve this, well, you could have 400,000 graduate students, but we couldn't afford all those graduate students. So in fact, they invented an automated system which uses image analysis, artificial intelligence, machine learning to then quantify our prawns. Now, very effective at doing that. This is one of the things that's really critical for us to keep on working on this. The next, of course, is that was all with visual wavelengths. One of the things we know that actually we've worked out that you can predict the quality and the growth rate of prawns using a relatively simple and non-invasive technique, measuring bricks, which is measured with a refractometer, but you still need to take a blood sample from your prawn. We also know that infrared technologies, near-infrared technologies, will allow us to measure that without a blood sample and through the side of the prawn. There's a certain amount of work we've done against that. So we need to bring the next level of technologies in here with hyperspectral scanning and near-infrared spectroscopy to actually now acquire these phenotypes slightly more effectively. This is the outcome that was achieved with family selection with these prawns, and it's essentially ended up. And really scaling this up and taking this to industry has meant that the industry partners get an 11% improvement in their profit margin. So we're on the journey for prawns. There's a long way to go. We haven't had the 400% increase, or what salmon was. It was really a doubling of their growth rate. But now also taking this to barramundi as well. And lastly, and I'll just, because I think I'm running out of time, I just wanted to also then circle back and make it really clear as well that part of the point here is that this is a great system where you can have other types of production where you can actually get useful product out of your waste stream as well. Farms within the Great Barrier Reef catchment area have to have zero net emissions. You can use algae to bioremediate the outflow of those. That algae is incredibly valuable as biomass, but to produce biocrude, protein, biochar, a whole set of nutraceuticals. Anyway, I'll leave that there.
I can already see a connection here between you and Ben, obviously algae-based. So, I mean, that's the whole purpose of this kind of meeting, that we actually start to realize, oh, gee, that's what my colleague next door does. So we can potentially actually explore further avenues to collaborate. Now, I forgot to say this. Please make use of this, I forgot the name now, the thing, so you can actually ask questions. It's not Speedo, it's something like Speedo. Slido. So, yes, please make use of it and send me as many questions as you can. Or Bernadette.
So it's Slido, not Speedo. Yeah, love it. Just like to begin to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we gather, and also to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So the research innovation I decided to choose among the portfolio of projects that we do at the Centre for Agricultural Engineering in this space of energy and bioresource recycling is centred on what we call this closed loop process. Excuse me. And the reason why I chose it is because it's already being applied in the industries for which we work, and that's mainly around livestock industries, but also food processing sectors. So I've specifically chosen an area which is applicable to Queensland, and that's with red meat processing, because we probably slaughter around about half of the nation's herd, particularly around in the southeast corner and a little bit up north. And it's around, firstly, developing an online anaerobic digestion assessment tool, and the second one is around the production of biofertiliser. And if we have a look at this, oh, wrong way, haven't got a laser here, but if we look at that circular diagram, we have livestock and the waste from it, and also some food waste coming into the biogas plant. We produce not only energy in the form of heat, electricity and fuel, but also a very valuable fertiliser, which then can be applied on land, which then can be made to produce food again. And as I said, we've worked with red meat processing industry, the pork sector, who are already doing these sorts of things. So the two projects, or the two activities, which comes from, I'm just acknowledging funding source at the moment, Rural R&D for Profit Waste to Profits project, which has received funding from the Australian Government and also Meat and Livestock Australia. And I work closely with the lead institution, QUT, and particularly with Ian O'Hara. So these two activities are the ones which we are involved in, we as in USQ, and it does define that closed loop approach, but it's particularly in terms of how do we increase the adoption, increase the understanding what's already going on in the industries, and to make them more profitable. So the online tool, we call it AD Advisor. And I can't basically show you at the moment. We're in the last processes of refining it, and it's going to be released at the end of the project, which is February next year. But essentially, it's a very user-friendly platform which gives an assessment of a high-level feasibility for prospective AD project, and also involving co-digestion. So what we got is essentially the ability for people who are in the industries of red meat processing, dairy industry, pork sector, feedlots, and also water utilities, being able to have a look at how they might be able to actually have a project. But at the same time, it also helps to optimise those projects that are already on the ground. So we have a number of tabs along the online tool, which looks at the regulatory aspect, which is very important even right at the outset, which needs to be considered. It looks at the waste types and amounts of biogas energy potential, also the technology, and then gives a high-level business feasibility. And also looking at further opportunities in co-digestion. What we would like to see beyond the project is actually addition of food waste as well, because that's an essential component to increase biogas output. This is a busy slide, but it's my last one. But it basically gives a bit of an understanding of what we're doing in the biofertiliser side of things. We're very fortunate at University of Southern Queensland in Toowoomba to actually have access to our own ag plot, which basically sits right out the front of our offices, which enables us to provide or get really quite controlled results when we do field trials. And so this particular project is working with water utilities to assess the agronomic potential of biosolids, but we're also looking toward seeing what that means in terms of the digestate from them. I'm sure if you see down the bottom here, we're in our third season of a biosolids application, and you can actually see visually the distinct differences in growth between those sections which have been applied with biosolids compared to a control. And that's been predominantly because of the high phosphorus content of the biosolids. These soils are P limited, so it is an outcome which has been bit serendipitous, but it's also been very important to understand the nutrition content of biosolids. And notwithstanding the fact that, into the future, biosolids may not be applied to land, it does give us an example of how the importance of these wastes are, not only just in land application, but also the potential to, say, extract phosphorus into the future, particularly given the peak phosphorus levels that we are seeing worldwide at the moment. I don't want to go through all of that, given that I've only got 5 minutes, but I think it was just more of an understanding that even though the industry is applying these techniques on farm, off farm, right now, there is still room to actually apply innovative tech research to actually increase profit and their understanding. So for the biofertiliser side, just want to end on the fact that we have got some funding from the Queensland Waste to Biofutures Fund to actually purchase a granulator, which I think is the next step in actually providing, or producing rather, a product for which farmers can actually utilise in conventional farm machinery, and therefore it gets to that, the fact that we actually have a value-add product, and therefore something more marketable than what's actually being produced now. Also, an indication of the interest that the Queensland government is having in this area, and that there is substantial potential to grow the area. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Gary, and just want to acknowledge my team, for which it wouldn't work otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bernadette. And I definitely want to talk about biofertilizers. It's a personal interest of mine. But so without further ado, Rob, you're on.
Thanks, Gary. So I'd just like to take Kylie's magic wand, and I'd like to wish for a large-scale fermentation-based biomanufacturing industry in Queensland. And this is not easy to put together, and I just want to give you an example of kind of our thinking around this space. So I think what you really need to do to be able to enable this is to build systems where you can go all the way from the discovery of biology through fermentation, through scale-up, process development, and be able to test the products in the field so that you know that they're working. And this is quite complex to put together. The universities have got a strong role at the front end of that, but you need significant partnership and buy-in from business and industry to take it through to the commercial levels. And I just want to give you an example today of one particular type of product, which are livestock feed supplements. You can see it's at bottom left-hand corner there. It's a very big market, very significant, and a very big opportunity for Queensland. And I've just taken the diagram on the last slide and just made that more specific for the feed supplement platforms. So again, discovery, development, scale of production, and then evaluation. And you need to be careful about how you put all these things together, again, with the right skills. We're very targeted about what you do to give you a chance to get you the data about whether these products work, whether they're economic in their manufacturing, and whether, therefore, they can go through to commercialization. So this was a model specifically for that sector. And we really took that into practice with this Advanced Queensland Innovation Partnerships project, which is called Biomanufacturing Advanced Animal Feed Supplements, where we worked with Brisbane company Bioproton and Ridley Agri-Products and Kennedy Creek Lime to take forward one enzyme feed supplement product and one bacterial probiotic for livestock as well, and really applied that thinking about how can we really accelerate the path through that discovery, development, scale-up, fermentation, production, then integrating with the large-scale feeding trials to actually show that these products work. And I think we got funding from the Queensland government for this because this was really kind of a first-of-a-kind demonstration in Queensland, and it's not easy to put together all of those different parts. And I'll just show you what we did. So the probiotic was already discovered coming out of research at University of Queensland, and also the phytase, this is the enzyme that was developed, came through as well. So this is an improved enzyme for the market. It's thermostable, it survives pelleting. It's very, very promising. We're able to take both of these products through the scale-up. So you can see this is our laboratory at QUT, where we can then move into fermentation development. But then we also have the pilot plant up in McCabe, where we did multiple campaigns at 1,000 litre of the probiotic. It was harder to achieve that with the phytase because that's produced in a genetically modified yeast, and there's more challenges associated with running those systems, and remains a gap in the market, although we have received funding recently and in the planning stages for equipping the McCabe plant to become GMO compatible in the future. As I mentioned, partnership with industry is essential to set targets and goals and be able to realistically move through these cycles of development. And I just want to recognise the work with Bioproton there, and you see the pictures of their facilities in Brisbane. We were able to achieve more scale-up work than we would have otherwise by using and partnering with them in the facilities. And you can see their laboratories there. Ultimately, the goal here was to generate enough material to go into large-scale feeding trials. And that is, again, what we achieved in the project. So the enzymes and the probiotics went into multiple species, so chickens, sheep, and cows, both dairy cows and for meat production, and produced some very valuable data, both on the safety and the efficacy of these products to move them towards commercial registration. So although we were able to achieve that scale up, I mentioned the challenges we had around GMO production at larger scale, and there really are limited options around the world for achieving that kind of scale up. I'm just showing you some examples of pilot scale facilities around the world, and the QUT facility is one of those. There are some more, including Australia at the CSIRO facility, but it does remain a big gap, and certainly when we're looking to move forward to commercial scale, or when the company is looking forward to commercial scale, there remains very large questions about where can we do that, and certainly challenges to do that in Queensland. So I think what we did achieve in this project was to show that this cycle of development of biology, fermentation, scale-up, testing does work. We exemplified that. And now hopefully what we can do is to apply that same principles and the knowledge and the skills that we've developed in the people, both in companies and within the universities, to be able to more rapidly do this again in the future. And we are looking forward to commercialization. We want to see our work get out into the real world, but we are challenged by how that can be manufactured and where that can be done. So we're kind of watching the space and trying to work on it. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
I mean, I just wonder, Rob, maybe you should also talk or consider talking with Ben about maybe using algae for enzyme production. Maybe that's a conversation to be had afterwards. So, Claudia.
Righty-ho. Lucky last. So, Gary asked me to talk a little bit about synthetic biology as a research innovation and touch on future directions. I've just talked in detail about all the different products that synthetic biology can deliver in the product session that we had previously. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. I am going to return very briefly to what synthetic biology is for those of you who weren't in the products session just before. So essentially it's using DNA-based systems to recode biology for useful applications. And we use engineering principles, so standardisation, abstraction, hierarchy, to build more and more complex systems, organisms, devices, etc. We operate in design, build, test and learn cycles, so we iteratively improve. And we generate very large data sets because we use automation, and we develop artificial intelligence algorithms to manage those data sets. That allows us to do very sophisticated things very quickly, much more predictably, and with a great high level of precision than we have previously been able to use with engineering biology. So many different products. These all happen to be in the isoprenoid family of natural products that I work in, and they're all the way through from sort of high-value products like pharmaceuticals that you need to produce at a relatively low volume, to low-volume products. High-volume products and low-value products like fuels and fuel additives, industrial chemicals, polymers and such forth. And then everything in between, including food and feed additives, flavours, fragrances, horticultural and agricultural products, etc. So in their natural sources, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes these products are not abundant enough. Their production levels are variable. They might be hard to purify or extract. You might be able to chemically synthesise them, or you might not, or it might just be too expensive to synthesise chemically for it to be economically viable. So the economic viability is a big issue. So what we do in my group is engineer, in my case, microorganisms, but this applies equally to all sorts of other organisms. We engineer metabolism to get them to produce these biochemicals at economically viable levels in a sustainable way. So we're modifying cellular networks, either introducing novel product pathways or enhancing our native product pathways, and getting those to production levels that will make it competitive. What that looks like very basically, there we go, sorry, it was missing. What it looks like very basically is taking your engineered organism, feeding it a feedstock, in this case sucrose from sugarcane, which we have in abundance in Queensland. We go into a bioprocess. Look, there's our agro bioprocess again, so it's circling around at the beginning of the session. But there's lots of other bioprocesses that we can use, and that gets us to the economic sustainability, ideally. There is this relationship between rate, yield and titer that you can achieve from bioprocess, and the value and that you can produce, and the market size and the volume of the product that you can produce. So the more valuable your product it is, the easier it is to get it to market viability in terms of the titers that are required. The less valuable, the more difficult, and that explains why biofuels have been an extreme challenge. Operating in that middle range, food ingredients, fine chemicals, etc., can be challenging, but is also achievable. So examples I gave in the session earlier were DuPont, Tate and Lyle 1,3 BioPDO. That's about a 10-year-old example, and they are doing 60,000 tonnes per annum, and it's cheaper than the petrochemical-based product. There's a company called Amyris, which was aiming for biofuels, and were able to pivot, fortunately, to high-value and mid-value products, flavours, fragrances, pharmaceuticals. And there's the Genomatica 1,4-butanediol product. This is quite interesting because it's not naturally found in biology, so it's completely artificial chemical, I guess, that's been engineered for production in microbial systems, and they went to lab and from lab to commercial scale in 6 years. So this technology can move extremely quickly. Now, the underlying technology that we've seen grow very, very quickly is, in the case of synthetic biology, is the application of automation. And doing things in much higher throughput allows us to explore a much greater solution space. So biology has basically evolved to do very specific things for a given organism. But if you're an organism competing for a niche, you don't have to be perfectly adapted to survive. You just got to be better adapted than the dude next door who's competing for your niche, right? So the evolutionary selective pressure is adapting you for competitiveness, but not for optimality. It also isn't selecting for what we want, it's selecting for what life wants. So there's a much greater solution space that we can explore, and using standardisation and automation allows us to explore that space in months rather than years or millennia, and get to optimal solutions or local optimal solutions much more quickly. So we do this in a facility called a biofoundry. It's a robotic high-throughput DNA and organism engineering facility. The process involves consultation with a stakeholder who brings us their DNA-encoded biodesigns, and we convert them, standardise them into high-throughput protocols and workflows. We put it into a design, build, test, learn cycle, and back to the client goes whatever it is they want, be that DNA or microbial strains or even just the data from the experiments. It's a closed-loop experimentation cycle, and it includes data mining, artificial intelligence, and you can remotely access the system. So that design, build, test, learn cycle includes DNA and organism design, assembly, organism transformation, phenotyping and high throughput as per the rest of the system, and also your AI and your data analysis. Now, the thing that this enables in particular is simultaneous exploration of those design options, unique hypothesis exploration, and obviously far accelerated development of strains. Very quickly, I'm going to flag, so there's a synthetic biology roadmap which is going to be launched tomorrow. You should all go along, it's online, so it's easy to get to. It's the next step beyond the Ecola roadmap that was released in 2018. And the idea behind this is to really focus on the commercial and economic opportunities that exist for synthetic biology in Australia, and give some hard recommendations about what we need to do to move it forward. So 3 main objectives. So help to facilitate greater national coordination, align our SynBio activities, look at the commercially feasible opportunities over the short, medium and long term being out to 2040, and look at the things that need to be done, so the priority enabling activities that are required. And it's really a policy information device to help inform industry, government and research operational decision making. I'm going to give you the high level snapshot, the teaser, and that is that there's a potential $27 billion economic opportunity for Australia in this space and 44,000 jobs in the environment where we're looking at high growth and large market share for Australia to capture. Most of that comes from the food and agriculture space and the health and medicine space. And so those are the areas that we're looking at as priority areas. To find out more about that, please register for the synthetic biology roadmap launch tomorrow. Go back in time. The details are there. There's a website there. It's too long to copy it down, but if you just search for CSIRO and events and scroll down a bit, you'll be able to click through on that. If you've got any further questions, please reach out to myself, to Greg Williams, who's running the roadmap, and if you want to know more about the BioFoundry, there's an email address there for you as well.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. So while the panel now joins us, I think we have another few minutes, isn't it? Or how do we stand? No? One? One question, because I have just one question. Maybe come up anyway, ask a question while you move. So, look, I mean, no surprise, obviously, in terms of the research you guys do. Many people do in Queensland. We are fantastically strong, and nobody sort of disagrees. Queensland is the state for bioeconomy. We have sort of minerals, feedstocks, etc. Say, using sort of Kylie's magic wand. So if it's sort of basically, if you had sort of your way, what it takes for us in Queensland to translate this fantastic potential we have in the knowledge base, in the backyard, to actually really become a global leader in the bioeconomy? That's for all of you. So I'll just open it up. So we have maybe a couple of minutes to discuss that. Maybe if everybody can add a comment.
The microphone's turned on, there we go. So we talked about this in the last session, and I'm going to repeat what I already said because they're two key things. You weren't there, you missed it. So the 2 gaps in our impact delivery pipeline in Australia at the moment are, quite obviously, one is translating technologies from the research sector through to the commercial sector. So we're missing bioincubators, bioaccelerators, support systems to get technology out of the university and CSIRO and research sector into the real world and closing that valley of death. So we do it a little bit, but not as much as we really need to be doing it, and a lot of it offshores in order to get over the valley of death. Second gap is in scaled fermentation capability, in particular in aerobic fermentation. So we've got facilities at CSIRO down at Clayton that Rob mentioned. We've got the McCabe facility, but none of them are anything like the scale that it's going to be required to get massive production produced. Yeah.
Anybody else wants to add something to it?
Found the techno-economic and life cycle work really useful to be able to guide these processes. And if we're thinking about sustainable future bioeconomies, then we need to get that economic, social, environmental modelling done. And I think it'd be really good if we could get industry, government and researchers to work together on that so that we can define good pathways and solutions. The point was made this morning as well, working together would be much quicker.
Just to add to that, I think, yeah, I'm on. And it's more at a foundation level, which would actually feed into, research to make implementation of projects. It's just data. There has been a lack of data in anything, like whether it's waste characterisation, whether it's data around, supplied by, the industries for which we work. And one of the reasons why we even did the techno-economic feasibility tool was because we were finding it actually hard to to engage our industry stakeholders to provide that data, because it just doesn't exist. So I just wanted to leave that there because I think it applies across the board to implement projects and things like that.
If I had a magic wand, I think I'd want Australia to be leading in the new economy as we move away from fossil towards this massive opportunity we've got in the future bioeconomy, rather than Australia kind of dragging and coming up second.
Yeah, that's it does seem like we just don't take advantage of all of our opportunities, and really, I suppose the maybe I think about some barriers. I think we tend to get a little bit obsessed with certain technologies, and I was trying to make the point before that we've become incredibly good at the genetics. We can do that much better, and we kind of let other things lag behind, and so we need to keep an eye on that so that we don't. So that we don't let that happen, because at the moment, for what we're trying to achieve, it's in fact just the ability to do the phenotyping which is holding us back and make those linkages. So to not forget about that whole picture.
Look, I see that Madonna is waving, so unfortunately we have to wrap it up here. But I think the bottom line is we picked up the ball now, so the big challenge is let's not drop it, and we have a mandate. We want to put this state on the map so that when the Olympics come, we are really #1 in the world, not just in sports. All right, thanks a lot, all of you.
Thank you for the generosity of your time and of your comments, and Gary for your facilitation. You know, the amount of innovation unknown outside our universities is really quite staggering, and the knowledge of what others are doing and the importance of working together is a theme that has shone through almost every one of our panel discussions today. Our next panel for the day centres around regional opportunities, and we have some wonderful panellists who will show just how important the regions are to this. And to guide our discussion here is the CEO of the Food and Agri-business Network, Emma Greenhatch. Emma's done so much, as your electronic conference pack shows, but her experience is headlined by her strong networks and leadership and an ability to translate ideas into actions that deliver positive and sustainable outcomes. And that, again, is a theme we've heard repeatedly today. Emma, a big warm welcome.
Thanks so much, Madonna. What an amazing day it's been. Made lots of new connections and lots of great follow-ups to have. So we stand between you and drinks and the final networking for the day. So looking forward to a very interactive discussion with our panellists today. So I don't have two Matts or two mics, so that's great. Kylie Porter, who was with us before from the Greater Whitsundays Alliance. We've got Tom Hall from AgriFood Connect. We've got Ben Artup from the Bundaberg Regional Council. And we have Greg Bruce. Is he on Zoom? No? Coming? Not coming? Oh, he's there. Oh, there he is. Hi, Greg. So joining us on Zoom. So please put the questions through. It would be really good to have, this is your last chance to ask that burning question that you've had all day, and hopefully we've got a panel here that's going to be able to answer it for you. But I think one of the things I'd love to hear from you in this closing session is we've talked a lot today about collaboration, and as a food and agribusiness industry cluster, that's what we live for, is how we get our industry to collaborate with each other and also with other stakeholders, including government and research, etc. So I'd love for you in your questions to put through how you also see that we could encourage more collaboration to work towards a bioeconomy in our state. So I'm going to come and sit down. Everybody, no? Yep. Hey everyone, yep, you can hear me. So first of all, I'm just going to get each of our panellists to introduce themselves and where they're from, and then we'll jump into the questions. Over to you, Kylie, who has already probably done it, but there might be some people here who didn't hear you before.
The audience is always fresh meat. You've just got to keep going. Kylie Porter, Chief Executive Officer, Greater Whitsunday Alliance, and I'm the owner of the Magic Wand.
I want that magic wand.
Everybody wants the magic wand.
Tom.
Hi everyone, Thomas Hall, AgriFood Connect from Toowoomba. We're a the triple helix everyone talks about. So we're the industry-led in partnership with UQ and Telstra, and we aim to bridge that gap in translation through to industry and commercialisation and scale that we've obviously all heard a lot about today.
Ben Artup, I head up Strategic Projects and Economic Development with Bundaberg Regional Council, so local government representative on the panel today. The vision for our community is to build Australia's best regional community, and a big part of that is how we transition our economy from old economy to new economy industries, and the bioeconomy is obviously a very big part of that. So everything we're doing around our economic restructuring and planning is focused around the bioeconomy.
Greg.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Greg Bruce. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer in Townsville City Council, and I've been working here 25 years and heavily driving and creating local collaborations of people and business and industry at local government level for actual on-ground circular economy outputs through disasters and building city resilience with real projects.
Thanks very much, Greg. Might start with you, Ben. I'm really keen to understand what you see as the role of government in fostering a bioeconomy. I know you've started to touch on it a little bit there, but can you expand on that for us?
Absolutely. I guess when you think about the roles of government in facilitating any industry development, you think of the usual things around policy, funding, playing a role of a connector and constantly, all those sort of standard things. But I think one of the other things that governments, particularly state and federal, not local government, of course, needs to do to get this part of our economy going is to let some industries die. Industries grow and they come and go, and they're expected to transition from old to new industries. And I think, we're still hearing regularly every day things coming out from other levels of government supporting the fossil fuel industry. Projects around coal and gas are still being funded and supported, and the funding that's going into those industries, the old industries if you call them, is still quite significant. So I think if we want to send the right message domestically but also internationally, the right market signals, we need to at least stop putting those media releases out, but stop supporting those fossil fuel industries, and a lot of that funding can move to the bioeconomy in a more proactive and stronger way in this country, I think, to grow the bioeconomy.
It's a really interesting perspective. Greg, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I just took my video off.
We like looking at you. It's okay.
I don't like to be a big head above everyone if I'm up there, and I can see the size of me up there on the stage. I think I need to move back. So basically, we built a corporate plan that intimately has goals in it around circular economy, carbon neutral, zero waste. Our new CEO has led that, and we have the intention of building 6,400 new jobs. We've been doing a lot of pilots, a lot of trials from disaster that included 500,000 tonnes of organic waste from Cyclone Yassi. We turned that into a healthy soil, so using catalytic probiotics. And 100 tonnes of fish we trialled in the monsoon, and we used catalytic microorganisms in basically 3.5 billion years of technology by nature, and catalysed that into a feedstock straight into the river that could be assimilated by the background natural systems. And we've also dug out 846 tonnes of sediment from drains and wetlands, and we've had local businesses building real pathways to jobs and new equipment and new financing operations. And so basically from a government perspective, we know we're looking into this new carbon economy. We're producing water in the landscape from these microbes and the catalytic processes, and we're building life in our soils and healing our landscapes. But what we don't have from a federal and state government is any appreciation and understanding of what what that's like at local government level, and how we can actually build jobs and industry in bioeconomy from the bottom up, which is what we're doing.
A great perspective, and I think we've heard it a number of times today that we're really lacking a national policy and national strategy in this space. Going to jump to Kylie now on what's happening in your region in terms of bioeconomy initiatives and activities. I know you touched on it briefly before, but it'd be great to
Well, I think that I've touched on it before, but probably most of the presentations today have referenced the amazing work that QUT does, you know, in the biocommodity plant in McCabe, and as well as the work that they're doing around expanding their fermentation facilities, which is happening, you know, at the moment. You know, we've got multiple pieces of work on, which is, you know, market sounding, talking to international proponents about how we actually have a, you know, a future foods processing facility, you know, established in region, you know, and then, you know, we've been long-term players, you know, in this bioeconomy for a really long time. You know, our Mackay Sugar Precinct, you know, has a cogeneration plant which, you know, powers a third of Mackay City electricity. You know, and we've just, you know, taken a lot of that for granted. You know, what we need to do as a region is really get very serious about focusing on, you know, picking a winner and actually getting behind that. That's not to say that we don't look at everything else that's a part of the, you know, the opportunity spectrum, but we need to actually be very focused about achieving some wins so we can actually communicate to our broader community that this is real, that the bioeconomy is real. It's not going to break us. I disagree with you, you know, Ben. Our economy can't walk away from a legacy industry. My region can't walk away, you know, from those fossil fuel industries. You know, we leave a very big black hole in the Queensland Treasury of about $3 billion with our coal royalties. So I'm not certain what we replace that with. We have to transition in a way that's balanced for our economy. And, you know, that's what we're very focused on, is to take our strengths and capabilities, you know, that we have in these legacy industries and parlay those into this new economy.
Hold that thought too for the last question I have around how we work across regions too in building critical mass and capability in different areas. Thank you. Tom, what's happening in Toowoomba?
It's interesting you mentioned transitioning. I was talking with a CEO of a large packaging company the other day, and obviously they're wanting to explore biopackaging and what can be done and what's the commercialisation pathway to, you know, a box costing only a few more cents than it does from a standard supplier, so that it is, you know, effective for an industry producer. But the transitioning is really important, and working with industry, researchers, government to help map out that transition, because that's always the challenge. It's great to say, yes, this is where we need to go, but how do we do that without crippling industry? And you also mentioned wins. You know, there's a lot that Australia is already doing out there at the moment around the bioeconomy. Unless you're involved in the sector or close to someone who is, you don't know what's going on.
You're not celebrating it.
That's it. I look at my own farms. We're putting all the manure back into the fields. We're now achieving an extra 20 to 30% higher protein in the sorghum. That's now a value add. Unless we're telling our neighbour and they're telling someone else. And you know, that's a really minor example, but there's so much going on. You mentioned the sugar industry. It's continually having to reinvent itself to remain sustainable, keep the lights on the farm's tables. We really need to celebrate the wins, encourage them, and work collaboratively. I know it's a bit of a tagline these days, but by working together, we can look at the scalable and commercial solutions that aren't going to bankrupt industry. Because at the end of the day, it's industry that have got to foot the bill for this. They need to say that, well, you know, it's not only social, but my triple bottom line is benefiting here, and here's my roadmap, and this is how I'm going to adopt it and transition.
One of the discussions that I was having with Kylie before is about finding a common language, because there are so many different ways of describing bioeconomy, and we all work in industries and communities and organisations that are doing work in bioeconomy, but how do we create that common language so we understand what that means? Ben, what's happening in Bundaberg? I know there's a lot happening in Bundaberg.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in our area. I guess our main signature project's the Bundaberg Biohub, and that's an interesting story that council's been working with the private sector for many years now. And I guess really how it came about was a little bit before my time, but council had an old wastewater treatment facility that had reached the end of its useful life, and we were able to transition that asset to the private sector, to the Utilitas group, who took on that asset because they saw the opportunity with some of that existing infrastructure that was on that site to use it for a bio hub and a whole range of bioeconomy tenants that they're now attracting to that site. So that asset, it's now, I think, 75% fully tenanted with bioeconomy companies, alga production, waste-to-energy companies, looking at green hydrogen production and other sort of small, soon-to-be commercial-scale tenants that are moving to that biohub. And I think it's Australia's first fully master-planned biohub that's been created out of that partnership between the council and the private sector. So that's one of I guess, our signature project in that space, where we've got one exciting project at the moment around hydrogen, where we're working with Utilitas and a hydrogen technology provider called Recarbon, who are looking at producing green hydrogen from that biohub, where the council, we would come in and enter into a purchase agreement for that hydrogen to run 2 of our waste garbage trucks off hydrogen from hydrogen fuel to be produced at the biohub. And those vehicles that we would use to do that will come through a consortium that we've established through Hyzon, who'd bring on the fuel cell technology and work with Superior Pack, a Bundaberg company who just happens to be Australia's largest manufacturer of garbage trucks. So they'd enter another consortium where we would lease one of those, initially two of those hydrogen-powered garbage trucks off the Hyzon Superior Pack consortium, and council would be, I guess, the first commercially demonstrable hydrogen project in Australia, where you have the complete supply chain from making hydrogen to a use case with the council taking that first step to be a customer for the hydrogen, but also bringing the vehicles in. So when we pull that off, hopefully they'll kick off early next year. It'll have Australia's first publicly available hydrogen refuelling station there at the Bundaberg Biohub, which will get a lot of attention.
And you've raised 2 important points there around role of government in terms of leadership, but also procurement, which came up this morning as well. Greg, can you share what's happening in Townsville?
Well, building on what I was talking about before with, the 3 main trials that we did, we've really begun to see that, we've been burying away our problems into the landscape with landfills and where there's a high carbon emissions and high cost of remediating. And so, we're really focused on zero waste within 5-10 years, and being able to divert products and waste that's really a resource. And we've got some projects focused on weeds and giving weeds a value, because basically shifting weeds to a landfill or not cutting them down and not treating them in the landscape, they're running wild and overcoming most locations in the world. So it's a market price failure. So we're looking at how do we embed those circular economy by actually turning a weed into a costed resource. And we're working with a number of biotech companies in, as I said, utilising and freeing up these 3.5 billion years of technology, where, as my understanding it is, the microbial life that was around then was in a toxic chemical soup. And we have all these toxins and riverways that are, in poor soils and degraded soils. So we're looking at how do we activate and take a weed problem and turn it into a resource for the soil, where it builds up healthy, biologically active soils. And we use the natural background biology to do that. So it's called a catalyst. And one of the biotech companies that we work with closely, VRM Biologic, has been working on that for more than 30 years. And they've now got massive contracts in China exporting a lot of our activated bioresource from gardens and from food waste that end up going to China in containers out of our port. And they've got an agreement to do, I think, 4% of China's soils that have degraded. So locally, we're translating that through our Reef Assist project. We've got 5 Indigenous traditional owner and teams out there on the landscape that are businesses or not-for-profits. And they're actually, that's funded by the state government, and they're actually cutting down weeds and then using a 6-month groundswell process to, instead of decomposition, it's actually becomes building carbon, building water holding, building the organic humus layer in soils. And we know we can take a fully grown pig and we can cover it with these bioactive 3.5 billion year old technology, and within 2 days that the pig is disappeared in the open. And that's pretty remarkable. That's what happened when we did 100 ton of fish that you couldn't get 100 meters from these fish from the flood that we had in 2019 without throwing up. It was that revolting. But we applied this biotechnology, native biotechnology, and within 2 to 3 days, the excavators could get in and we could start to transform. And we use that in a lot of our wetlands for environmental restoration of wetlands. And we're starting to get demonstrated that we can actually turn sewer environments where in the floods sewage came into our local environments, and within a week we can transfer it into a lovely smelling a clean waterway. So we're looking at activating this and building, as I said before, these economic pathways to actually give weeds and waste from drains and wetlands an actual value. So and we're demonstrating it in these trials, and we've got another company that in our area called Atlas, which has now taken waste that's been dug out from our drains. They have they've tested the material that they've activated and turned into a humic, and they're actually packaged it up and selling it in shops and buckets now, commercialising it.
A lot of diversity in what's happening across each of your regions. Picking up on what Kylie was talking about before, this is an emerging space, but we've also been working in this space for a very long time. How do we share and leverage and build upon what each other's doing across different regions around Queensland instead of what can often happen in these spaces where it ends up being competitive and duplication occurs? So back to that collaboration, how does Queensland, in terms of establishing Queensland as a leading bioeconomy, do that collectively? I'm not going to put any of you on the spot. You can just jump up and down and say, I've got the answer.
We're already working together, to be honest.
Great. Tell us how.
One of AgriFood Connect's first programs is a Agtech and logistics hub in Toowoomba. It's a $6 million 3-year program funded by the Queensland Government in partnership with University of Queensland, University of Southern Queensland, TSBE, the regional economic body up there, and FKG Group, who I work for, quite an entrepreneurial civil and engineering construction company, but their roots are in agriculture. So we've got a hub, and obviously it's all focused around commercialisation and scaling of products. It's really looking at challenge and solutions. What's your problem? Let's work together to find a solution. It's really that simple. Ben's obviously got a great program up in Bundaberg. We've already been up there, and we're taking a lot of learnings from one another, to be honest. We're both just getting started. There's a whole bunch more manufacturing hubs. There's the bio hub in McCabe. There's a lot more. It just comes down to let's get all our heads together and start working together. Where'd you fail? Where'd you succeed? What learnings can I take from what you're doing and apply to my industries? You know, we've already seen lots of different technologies or science, whatever it might be, shifted from the mining industry into agriculture. We've got some AI programs now. So there's nothing to stop anyone within any industry restructuring or refocusing the lens and saying, well, how can I help someone else out? There's plenty of ways I can scale and commercialise my product and still get a decent return whilst helping out a neighbour.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Thomas said. I mean, you've just got to get out there and start talking across the state with other stakeholders that have working in the similar space. For example, the Toowoomba and Bundaberg Agtech hubs, we're sort of working on a hub and spoke model where we know we have different strengths and work in different spaces and sort of working that up. Take an example with our BioHub. You know, we're doing a lot of work on the hydrogen industry at the moment, so we started a hydrogen technology cluster where we bring in the best experts in hydrogen technology to come to talk to our local industry and anyone else in Queensland who's working in that space of hydrogen. There's a lot of players at the moment. So it's just a matter of opening up the ecosystem and getting people to come to those forums, but those clusters and things that we do in economic development facilitation, but being very open about it. But it takes initiative. You know, we've had to map out and talk to people that are working in that space to bring them to those forums, and they can be done virtually. So yeah, it's just a lot of work, really. Yeah.
But you're right. COVID has enabled us to do it virtually now. We could before, but we now know we can. So that has made it easier for us to connect when we're not physically in the same location.
I think that when the Queensland Government updates the Biofutures roadmap, no pressure, team, you know, I think that, 5 years in, I think that there is a lot of learnings, and that refresh will actually really help define and perhaps more focus the opportunity for regions moving forward. Because, at the moment, it is how long is a piece of string, and I think that we need to move beyond that. And if we're really, really going to take, make that transition from concept into commercialisation, or from research into commercialisation, we absolutely have to have those wins. We need the runs on the board, and I hate those cliches and those phrases. But we're at that point of our journey where we need to start proving out that this is when this is not just good on paper. This is actually reality. And I think to do that, we need to be focused about what our strengths are in each region and play to those strengths. And I'm really hopeful that the roadmap, I think, is probably going to offer us a little bit more clarity over, each region's strengths, roles, where we can actually really play, a critical part in this new economy.
Great call to action. Greg.
No pressure.
I think we're building on what people have been saying. It's really for us is we've got this embryonic, which is proving substantial gains and opportunities. But one of the challenges is that government bureaucrats and other business and industry can sometimes be focused more on scientific reductionism rather than holism. So it's interesting to hear some of the previous speakers speaking about systems and AI. We're really into the STEM world and looking at that sort of thing. But we've in the 2019 floods, we had a company from McCabe, NaturShield, which manufactures their products there. They came up and offered their product, which is at that time wasn't a hospital grade bioengineered natural enzymes and all sorts of actual good stuff that are healthy for people. And that company came up and offered that. We helped create the pathways to distributing it across Townsville, and paradoxically helped a Mackay-based company to leverage their product out into the market. Since then, they've now got it as a certified hospital-grade product. And in addition, they've headquartered their company in Townsville while still building their facilities are in Mackay. So there's a collaboration between two cities that's going on in the background. And there's a lot of things going on in the background that people don't appreciate and understand. I think from a collaborative point, we've got to stop or reduce our focus on reductionism and just the smallest input for the maximum product and money making, and look at how do we actually collaborate together and produce things like carbon accounting. It's a challenging cost for us to be able to prove what we're doing. We know we've got a lot of data that we've collected. As I said, we took the waste from the drains and wetlands, and that got turned into a commercial product that's going back into the lawns, being sold for $40 a bucket. There's 2 different types of product in there, and it's come from the drains and wetlands. And if you saw it when it came out, you would not want to be anywhere near it. And it had huge amounts of heavy metals and nasty materials in it. It's since been analysed, and that's the only way they can get it on the market. And it's just pure organic, lovely humic soil now. So and it's been fully analysed, and there's nothing in it. So the little bugs have done their job. You know, they can balance systems in our guts and our lawns, and we can, if we can collaborate together to break through that holism. There is some merit in it, but you can't necessarily follow through, as some of the previous presentations were talking about. You need an AI to be able to follow, or not even follow is not the word, to be able to put together all the information and data that's coming at you from a million different directions when you're dealing with little tiny bugs and microorganisms that we don't even know the names of. You can't even measure them in a petri dish, let alone be able to reductionistically follow the pathways of them. So that's where we need some collaborative spirit.
Back to what Janie and Ashley were talking about before, about the power of nature and utilising what we already have. Have you got something else?
I was just going to say, in terms of collaborating in the regions, you can't force it. You can only lead it. And what we've found is, for example, in the hydrogen space, businesses are busy. They don't have time to come and learn and spend days learning about hydrogen or other renewable energy products and things that could be integrated into their business. So we've had to go around, and we've got people helping us, talking to our local industry about how, for example, they could in the future integrate hydrogen into their operations, whether mobility or other sort of manufacturing. So that takes time, but you've got to do that legwork to get them educated on those opportunities, because if they understand it, then they'll collaborate, they'll come together, they'll invest the time, but there's a little bit of a knowledge and learning that process they need to go through, and you can provide that. And one last plug to do that, in terms of a regional context. Last year we held the Bundaberg Bioeconomy Conference, so it was sort of this, but in the regions, focused around the Bundaberg and our bioeconomy, where we brought together, I think it was 80 or 85 people similar to this audience to talk about the bioeconomy opportunities in Bundaberg, and we're doing that again this year on the 2nd and 3rd of November in Bundaberg, and we're doing that uniquely, if you've ever worked in local government, with Fraser Coast Council and Gympie Council. So we're partnering up on a regional level to bring in the speakers, the academics and the industry and the people to talk about the bioeconomy opportunities in our region. So if you want to collaborate in the regions on the bioeconomy, come to the Bundaberg Bioeconomy Conference.
Another
2nd, 3rd
great
of November.
call to action. Well, I think we're being wrapped up. So just Greg, Kylie, Tom, Ben, thank you so much for sharing that with us this afternoon. And sorry you're not here for drinks, Greg, but we'll have one for you. And I'm sure if anyone's got any questions that we haven't got to answer, then these wonderful people will be here for the break.
Well
Thanks.
said, Emma. Thank you. Please put your hands together for Emma and a terrific panel. Our final presentation is quite short, about 10 minutes, and it comes to us from Germany. And I want to introduce you to Andrea Noske, who is the head of the Sustainable Economy Bioeconomy Division in the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. And you will see Andrea explains in a real world what the bioeconomy offers and how others are doing it. From Germany, via video, Andrea Noske.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and honor to take part in the 2021 Queensland Bioeconomy Forum. As you may know, the federal German government adopted its national strategy on bioeconomy in January last year. At the same time, the Ministry of Education and Research celebrated the opening of its Science Year on Bioeconomy. Therefore, this forum is a wonderful occasion to both present and discuss the latest developments in bioeconomy in Germany with you. We are facing huge challenges, and we all know that we urgently need solutions in order to safeguard good living conditions for future generations. The bioeconomy is central to the most important issues of the 21st century, like how can we ensure food and resource security for the world population? How can we, at the same time, protect the climate and the environment, including biodiversity? How can we combine ecology and economy to secure future prosperity? The bioeconomy has the potential to provide answers and deliver solutions to these challenges. Thus, not surprisingly, the bioeconomy is gaining importance worldwide. As of 2020, more than 60 countries have launched strategies to develop a bioeconomy, and the trend is rising. Germany has published its National Bioeconomy Strategy in the beginning of the year 2020 in order to emphasize that the bioeconomy is a central pillar of the German sustainability policy. This strategy bundles the previous activities in one strategy and thus provides a coherent framework for the further design and implementation of the bioeconomy in Germany. The new strategy sets the framework for the successful expansion of the bioeconomy over the next years. It addresses a broad spectrum of goals at different levels of society and in all economic sectors. The focus of research funding is on expanding biological knowledge and the use of biological processes and systems in order to tap renewable raw materials even better for industrial processes. In connection with digitization and cutting-edge technologies across all disciplines, we want to exploit further the potentials for a sustainable economy, like through maintaining biogenic raw materials efficiently through a circular use. With this, we want to expand further Germany's leading position in the bioeconomy. In order for the bioeconomy to take effect, it must above all meet social requirements and needs. It is therefore important to have an open discussion and to involve all social groups. The Science Year of Bioeconomy, which has been started last year and will last until end of this year, offers us a special opportunity for this. However, apart from all the different objectives described, I want to highlight our most important aim. With our new strategy, we want to make essential contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. In order to achieve our goals in the bioeconomy, we have to address a broad spectrum of aspects. Most of these are cross-cutting and need common instruments to be addressed in an appropriate way. We have come a long way and already developed suitable instruments, and we will improve these measures under the new bioeconomy strategy. I would like to emphasize in particular that we will make the implementation of our new bioeconomy strategy participatory. To this aim, we have appointed a new Bioeconomy Council in December last year. This council will provide independent expertise to develop an implementation plan for the bioeconomy strategy, thereby involving all relevant actors and stakeholders in the bioeconomy in Germany. Furthermore, we will extend our cooperations on the national level with the German Länder governments, on the EU level with our European partners, and certainly also with international actors. Beyond this, we will further enhance our efforts to create the basis for an open and constructive discussion about all bioeconomy issues. Finally, we will further develop a monitoring system for the bioeconomy to get the data and information we need to take the right political decisions in the sense of a sustainable development. I will address this point in a few slides. In order to be able to develop contributions from the bioeconomy for the implementation of the sustainability goals, we have to address complex issues that can only be achieved with holistic ways of thinking and working. For this reason, we have defined 6 modular components for the implementation of the bioeconomy strategy, which cover the various aspects of the bioeconomy. These building blocks interlock and guarantee that we can implement our research goals flexibly. The expansion and use of biological knowledge and the use of converging technologies and interdisciplinary cooperation are important to advance the development and deepening of sustainable future technologies, besides other challenges. However, what I would like to point out here in particular is the need for an exchange across national borders, because it enables us to live up to our global responsibility. We support the cooperation in the bioeconomy across borders with dedicated funding formats, also with Queensland, as I will explain to you in a few slides. The following figures should give you an impression of the scope of the BMBF funding into bioeconomy. They refer to the last financial year. In 2020, we invested 140 million euro into a total number of 1.7 thousand research projects, which are all allocated into 31 different funding measures. With our research funding, we are setting new accents, but also build on previous priorities. All funding measures serve to fill the 6 building blocks of bioeconomy with content like measures that deal with the efficient and sustainable production of plants, measures that involve the development of new products and production routes, measures in which social issues or aspects relevant from a social point of view are explored. And in the following, I will go into more detail about a few selected funding measures and projects funded among them. The bioeconomy has the potential to make important contributions to sustainable development in economic, ecological, and social terms. But which developments are heading in the right direction, and where must paths taken be abandoned because they prove to be unsustainable? Such questions can only be answered if comprehensive and reliable data on the use of natural resources and the associated effects are available. Providing this data is the aim of the bioeconomy monitoring, which was launched jointly by the Federal Ministries of Research, Agriculture and Economics. 14 research institutions have until now been working on its implementation. In the first phase, a total of 5 so-called footprints were calculated as leading indicators. They indicate the amount of natural resources consumed by humans. On the basis of the interim stages achieved with the pilot report from June 2020 and an initial interim assessment, it is now necessary to take into account the further aspects of the bioeconomy, to consolidate and expand the database, to make further differentiations, including spatially and according to material flows and product groups, and to expand links to other monitoring approaches, for example, in the area of biodiversity and climate change. To achieve these goals, we will continue to promote our bioeconomy monitoring in a second phase. We have just selected the successful consortium, which will start its work this year. Many funding possibilities are available to form European consortia, for example through Horizon 2020 or the new Horizon Europe framework program. Whereas funding programs for international cooperation in the bioeconomy are rare, although they are highly mandatory. Therefore, the BMBF established Bioeconomy International in 2012 as a format with which to fund German partners in international consortia beyond Europe. The overall concept of this initiative is simple. The funding goes to the R&D projects with subjects relevant to the bioeconomy. The composition of the consortia is entirely flexible. Universities, research organizations, companies can join. A minimum consortium would consist of 1 German and 1 international partner. No maximum is defined. Nevertheless, the projects have to be equally balanced, which means the expertise of the partners should complement each other and every partner has to contribute an essential part. And the international partners have to bring their own funds via other calls for proposals or via their own expenses. An exception are bilateral modules, which we have been conducting with 1 to 2 countries each year. And here the calls are carried out in parallel on both sides and the projects are jointly selected. In total, we conducted 8 calls since 2013 and we received 671 proposals. 114 projects have been selected for funding so far and 2 out of them are with partners from Queensland. We regard the potential in Queensland's bioeconomy as strong and would like to strengthen our cooperation with Queensland for that reason. Since our delegation trip in late 2019, many discussions have taken place with the Government of Queensland and we are very eager from both sides to conduct a joint call for proposals via our Bioeconomy International program in the next future. With this, I would like to close and I am happy to join this workshop and I would like to thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. And drinks and networking just a couple of minutes away. But you know, nothing about the bioeconomy is easy. Even its definition, what it actually means, is not widely understood, certainly outside this room. I loved the simplicity of this definition offered during our morning session. It is the production, use and conservation of biological resources, and its aim is to provide information, products, processes and services to build a sustainable economy. Professor Ian O'Hara told us that it was founded on 3 principles: economic opportunity, environmental urgency and societal benefit. And if you think about our keynotes and panels today, that is so true. They are the wind beneath the sails in this space. We also heard this morning the enormous challenges we face, where the bioeconomy might be directed to help provide a solution. Food for a growing population, energy to support development, reducing emissions, that list could go on and on. But so too do the opportunities. Janie and Ashley told us that by 2035, an industrial biotechnology and bioproduct sector could contribute $1.8 billion to the state's gross state product. The bioeconomy means we do more with less, they told us. Jim Phillips said that each $1 million of investment in bio-based would create up to 30 jobs, a significant proportion of which would be in rural areas. And Claudia Vickers later this afternoon teased us with the $27 billion opportunity in food and agriculture, health and medicine when talking about this synthetic biology roadmap. The focus on regions today, from the Whitsundays to Bundaberg to Townsville and other places, is not accidental, as you saw during the panel just before lunch and again in our last panel this afternoon. And Matt Keeley highlighted both the reluctance and the opportunity when he said one of the challenges he faced was farmers saying, "Show me the money." A shout out here to both Kylie this morning and Emma this afternoon and their stellar panels and how they looked at the challenges, the opportunities, the successes in agriculture and feedstocks and in our rural communities. We need to capture both the knowledge and the energy, I think, in our rural communities and what they offer, to look at the headway that's been achieved in some places and join that momentum for change. What struck me as a storyteller is that this requires both a broader and a better understanding of the potential of the bioeconomy, but also a broad determination to work together. Silos won't work. There was not one presentation today where a siloed approach showed a success. Governments can't do this alone either. Everyone has a role to take forward the opportunities, and that includes taking on the challenge of adopting new ways of doing things. Disruption has turned holidays and the accommodation and transport industries upside down, largely for the better. Perhaps it's a healthy dose of disruption that could be the fuel needed to firepower the bioeconomy. To steal a phrase from Claire Blaine, we need to use our biomass wisely, locally, nationally, globally. What can we learn from other countries and jurisdictions that have bioeconomy councils and national strategies? Certainly the keynotes today from Germany filled in that picture. The coordinated approach through national strategies and councils stood out. Andrea Noske just cleverly showed how the bioeconomy done right navigates solutions to safeguard the living conditions that we all want. It involves a marriage between ecology and economy to protect and bolster prosperity, she said. Nothing worth fighting for is ever easy. At the moment, the road is tricky, from engaging government and industry to collaboration and knowledge. There's also an uneven playing field, we were told, and as one speaker suggested, we don't necessarily even have the luxury to make mistakes. But there is open sky ahead and a strong path forward. Bioeconomy young champion Lucas told us this morning that industry, university and state working together was crucial. The Accord approach, as it was called in a later panel, was reinforced again and again. And it's been what today is all about too. The first step in getting to know and understanding each other's strengths. What's happening in this space? How can we capture that knowledge? We don't have this great knowledge about who does what elsewhere, Professor Gary Schenk told me at lunchtime. But in his innovations panel this afternoon, we saw some of the innovations underway at the Centre of Solar Biotechnology at UQ, for example, or the digital aquaculture in prawn breeding, or the work Bernadette talked about in closed-loop waste management, just to name a few. Today propels forward that conversation, developing an understanding of the skill landscape, the players at a local, national and global level, the challenges and the opportunities ahead, including to the bottom line. Those themes have been amplified repeatedly. Most of us as parents probably have a whole lot of slogans we deliver to our children, apart from tidy your bedroom. Leaders are made, not born. You're not kind online if you're not kind offline. And at my house, talk can be cheap if it's not followed up by a determination to proceed and succeed. Today's conversation has to continue. Capturing the urgency of our discussions is so crucial, and all sessions have been taped and will be available to you as delegates after today's forum. So will as many answers as we can to the questions you have posed. That engagement here has to flow on to industry though, where engagement is crucial for your ideas to be nurtured and importantly funded. That commercialisation pathway without industry often leads to a dead end. Doing something wonderful in a laboratory can deliver results, but taking it to the world requires different pathways and partnerships. Today we've started that important conversation around the bioeconomy and what we need to do to further it. That's been a key aim of Queensland's Bioeconomy Forum, and it's been at the heart of why Life Sciences Queensland sees today as so vital. To you, our delegates, a big thank you. Remember, in a couple of minutes, that conversation can continue at our networking reception outside. But first, to formally pass that vote of thanks, please join me in welcoming Life Sciences Queensland CEO, Claire Blaine.
I won't take up too much of your time, as I know you're probably all very thirsty by this point. I just wanted to get you all to thank Madonna King for her work today. She's marvellous and her passion is just so amazing, so thank you. I'd also like to thank all of the other speakers and moderators, especially those that doubled and tripled up. Really appreciate your time today. It was just a wealth of information and we do want to keep the conversation going. To the audience, thank you for participating today. A big thank you as well to the organising committee, especially Professor Ian O'Hara, Professor Gary Schenk, and Stuart McIntyre and Vicky Lowe from Department of Environment and Science. And last but certainly not least, I'd just like to thank my team as well. The amount of work that does go into these events behind the scenes, it's just mind-blowing, and they do an amazing job. So thank you all. Please enjoy the networking and enjoy it while we're fortunately out of lockdown. Thank you.